The wind carried the smell of ash and burnt wood across the prairie, curling through the tall grass like a restless spirit. In the fading glow of the day, where the horizon bled crimson into the shadows of night, a woman's trembling voice broke the silence. "I am requesting you. Please take my younger brother with you. We are in trouble." Her words cracked like dry twigs underfoot, each syllable weighed down with desperation. She stood before the warrior, a girl no longer but not yet hardened into the weariness of age. 30 years old, with lines carved around her eyes too deep for her age, she looked both fragile and unyielding at once. Her hair, once neatly braided, now hung loose and wild, streaked with soot from the fire that had consumed her family's homestead. Beside her stood a boy barely 12, his bare feet blackened by dirt and ash, his shirt torn at the sleeve. He clutched a dented tin cup in his small hands, holding it like a shield against a world that had already taken too much from him. His eyes, wide and hollow, searched the warrior's face as though the stranger might decide whether he would. Live to see another dawn, the man before them was unlike anyone the boy had ever seen up close. He was a warrior, his presence commanding the space around him like thunder rumbling low on the horizon. Broad shoulders glistened with sweat in the dying sunlight, his chest bare save for the scarred leather strap that crossed it, supporting the quiver of arrows at his back. Around his neck hung a piece of tribal jewelry, feathers and bone beads catching faint flashes of light. His long black hair, tied back in a loose cord, swayed gently with the prairie wind. His face was carved from stone, unreadable, his dark eyes deep and still as water at midnight. He did not move at once. He stood silent, the weight of their plea settling over him like dust. Behind the woman and her brother, smoke still rose from what had been their home. The smell of gunpowder clung to the air, sharp and bitter. Somewhere in the distance, a crow cried, its wings cutting through the reddened sky. The warrior had seen ruin before. He had seen fires eat through homes, cattle stampeded into the night, children silenced before they ever learned laughter. He had lived long enough to know that mercy was a rare visitor on this land. Yet something in the girl's voice kept him still, refusing him the easy choice of turning away. "Who comes for you?" His voice was low, rough, carrying with it the weight of storms long weathered. The girl's lips quivered. She tried to steady herself, but the truth clawed its way out like a wound that refused to close. "Men, 5 of them. They came at dawn." Her voice trembled with memory. "They wanted my father's land, the well he dug with his bare hands. When he refused, they killed him. My mother, too. They would have taken me, but I ran. My brother ran with me. We've been hiding since." The boy squeezed her skirt tighter, eyes glistening but silent. He would not cry. Not here. Not now. The warrior's gaze hardened, his jaw tightening. He had known such men. Greedy, faithless men who preyed upon the weak, who thought the world owed them its soil, its water, its women. His hand flexed against the bowstring at his hip, but he did not yet move. The prairie around them stretched in every direction, vast and empty, the kind of land that could swallow the lost whole. Yet tonight, the land felt smaller, tighter, as though the danger was already drawing in around them. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying faint sounds that did not belong, the echo of hooves on hard earth, distant yet approaching. Boy suddenly let go of his sister's skirt and reached for the warrior's hand. His small palm was warm, sticky with dirt and the faint trace of blood from a cut across his knuckle. His grip was desperate, clinging. "They'll find us if we stay," he whispered, his voice thin, frightened. "Please don't leave us here." The girl looked away, ashamed of her tears. She had sworn not to beg, not to crumble. Yet here she was, her last hope pinned upon a man she barely knew, a man whose silence was both terrifying and merciful. The warrior glanced down at the boy's hand, then back at the girl's face. Something stirred inside him, an ache he thought long buried. He had spent years wandering the borders of two worlds, neither claimed nor welcomed by either. A lone rider, carrying his past like a shadow. But in this moment, in the boy's grip, and the woman's plea, he felt a weight he had not carried in a long time, responsibility. Behind them, the faint sound of hooves grew louder, dust curling upward against the dying sun. The hunters were coming. The warrior's silence broke. "Stay close," he said, Dot, and for the first time since the fire had stolen their world, the girl felt a spark of hope pierce the darkness. The warrior's words, "Stay close," hung in the air like the low toll of a church bell, signaling both warning and promise. The woman's heart, still racing from fear, clung to those words as though they were a rope pulling her back from the edge of a cliff. Her younger brother's small hand remained in the warrior's grip, and in that grip was something she had not felt since her father had fallen safety. However fragile, the prairie around them shifted as the wind picked up, carrying the sound of hooves echoing through the wide expanse. Faint at first, like thunder behind mountains, but unmistakable. The girl flinched, her breath catching. The boy's grip tightened. The warrior lifted his head, eyes narrowing. His gaze swept the horizon where the sun was melting into blood-red light, the sky bruised with streaks of purple and gold. Dust rose in faint spirals far to the west, too steady, too deliberate to be the work of nature. "They're coming," the woman whispered, though the warrior did not need her warning. He had heard them long before she had. He crouched briefly, his calloused fingers pressing to the dirt. The ground itself spoke to him in tremors. More than 4 horses. Maybe 5. The riders were closing in. The boy looked up at him, lips trembling though he held his tears. "Can you fight them?" His voice was barely a breath, but the question sliced through the air. The warrior didn't answer immediately. His silence was heavy, deliberate. Finally, he spoke. "If they reach us here, there will be blood. We must move." He straightened, his frame towering against the dying sun. The girl's eyes followed him, filled with both fear and awe. He seemed unshakable, carved from the land itself, yet she knew even men like him could fall. The warrior motioned toward his horse tethered nearby, a sturdy stallion dark as midnight. "You ride with me." His tone was flat, a command rather than an offer. The boy clutched the tin cup tighter, his small chest heaving. The girl placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, though her own hand shook. "Do as he says," she murmured, forcing calm into her voice. With surprising strength, the warrior lifted the boy into the saddle first. The child wobbled but clung to the reins. Then he turned to the girl, extending a hand. For a moment, pride made her hesitate. She had survived this far on her own. But pride would not save her brother's life. She grasped his hand, the calluses rough against her palm, and he pulled her up with ease. The moment she settled behind the boy, the warrior mounted with a fluid motion, the horse shifting under the sudden weight. She could feel the tension in him like a storm bound tight, waiting to break. The stallion surged forward, hooves striking the dry earth, sending dust spiraling behind them. The prairie unfolded in silver shadows as twilight deepened, the endless grasses swaying like an ocean in the wind. The girl clung to her brother, her cheek pressed against his hair. Each breath was ragged, her chest aching with both fear and hope. The warrior rode hard, guiding the horse with the confidence of a man who knew the land better than he knew people. He did not waste words. His silence was its own language, telling her to trust him, telling her that he would not stop until the danger was behind them. Still, the danger did not fade. Behind them, faint and growing louder, came the unmistakable thunder of hooves. The men were not giving up. The girl risked a glance back. A dark cloud of dust trailed against the horizon, growing thicker. Shapes moved within it, riders, silhouettes. Against the dim sky, chasing like wolves. Her heart lurched. "They're faster," she gasped. The warrior's jaw clenched. He guided the stallion down a narrow slope where the earth dipped into a dry riverbed. The hooves struck stone with sharp cracks, sending echoes up the canyon walls. Sagebrush and mesquite scraped against their legs as the horse tore through the winding. Cut in the land, the boy twisted in the saddle, fear bright in his eyes. "Will they catch us?" The warrior's voice rumbled low, steady. "Not tonight." And though she wanted to believe him, the girl felt the weight of those words pressing heavy against her chest. Not tonight meant they would still come tomorrow. Not tonight meant the fight was only delayed. The night fell darker as they rode, the stars burning cold and clear above the prairie. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries sharp against the stillness. The land smelled of dust, sage, and the faint trace of smoke that seemed to follow them no matter how far they rode. Finally, when the hooves behind them faded into the distance, the warrior slowed. They had not been caught, not yet. He led the stallion toward a stand of cottonwood trees where the land dipped into shadow. The girl slid down from the saddle, her legs weak, nearly buckling beneath her. Her brother collapsed beside her, curling into the grass, exhaustion finally claiming him. She looked at the warrior, her eyes glistening. "You don't have to help us. You could have left us back there." Her voice cracked, not from accusation but from the fragile thread of gratitude. She was trying to hold together. The warrior stood still, scanning the horizon, his dark silhouette cut against the starlight. His answer came after a long silence. "If I leave you," he said softly, his voice rough as gravel, "they win." Something in the way he said it made her shiver, not with fear, but with the realization that this man, this stranger, carried his own war inside him. He was not just a rescuer. He was a survivor, forged from the same fire that had just consumed her home. And for the first time since dawn, when her family's world had ended, she felt not alone. The cottonwoods rustled faintly in the midnight wind, their leaves whispering like 1,000 secrets. The boy had curled himself into the grass, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths, exhaustion finally dragging him toward sleep. But before his eyes closed fully, he reached out blindly, his small dirt-stained hand grasping the warrior's wrist. Don't leave us," he murmured, his voice heavy with both fear and trust. "They'll find us if you go." The warrior froze at the boy's touch. His skin was warm, his grip surprisingly firm for someone so young. For a long moment, he did not move. He had ridden across these lands for years, always alone, carrying only what his horse could bear and what his bow could defend. He owed nothing to anyone. Yet now, here in this small hand clutching his arm, he felt something he had not felt. Since boyhood, an unspoken plea for protection, for belonging. He looked down at the boy, then at the girl sitting beside him. Her back leaned against the rough bark of a cottonwood, her hair tangled and face streaked with soot. But her eyes, blue and clear as the sky at dawn, watched him steadily. There was no demand in them, no command, only a quiet desperation held. Together by the thinnest thread of hope, the warrior's gaze shifted away. The prairie had taught him long ago that attachments were dangerous. He had been born between two worlds, son of a native mother and a white settler father, yet never fully welcomed by either. In towns, they saw his skin and his jewelry and spat at his feet. Among tribes, some called him half-blood, not pure enough to belong. So he had chosen the only life left to him, a wandering shadow, bound to no hearth, no family, no cause. Yet here, in this quiet pocket of night, a boy's hand and a woman's eyes pulled at him like the tide. The sound of hooves in the distance jolted him from his thoughts. Faint, far, but steady. The hunters were still on their trail. They would not rest until morning, Perhaps not even. Then he straightened, every muscle tightening with readiness. The woman caught the change in his posture and stiffened. "They're coming again, aren't they?" He nodded once. "Not close, but closer than I like." Her arms wrapped around her brother's shoulders, pulling him close, though the boy had already drifted into shallow sleep. "How long can we keep running?" She whispered, half to him, half to herself. The warrior's voice was low, certain. "As long as it takes." But even as he said it, he knew the truth: running would not be enough. Outlaws like these did not simply give up. They would chase until their prey was broken, or until someone stood against them. The girl pressed her cheek against her brother's hair, her eyes closing briefly. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but steady. "My father used to say, 'The land remembers those who fight for it.' He believed if you poured your sweat into the soil, if you bled into it, the land would keep you safe." She gave a bitter laugh. "But what good are words when men with guns come to take it all?" The warrior turned his head toward her, studying her face. There was a strength in her, he realized, though it was buried under layers of fear. The land did not yield easily, and neither had she. "You ran," he said finally. "That saved your brother. That is strength." Her eyes flicked up to meet his, startled by the unexpected words. No one had ever called her strong before. Not even her father. Before she could answer, the warrior crouched near the embers of a small fire he had built, carefully covering them with earth. "We ride before dawn. They'll expect us to move with the sun. We'll move with the stars instead." The woman pulled her brother closer, tucking a ragged blanket around him. Her voice cracked. "Why are you helping us?" The warrior's hand stilled. For a long time, he did not answer. His dark eyes lifted to the endless sky, stars scattered like cold sparks. Memories flickered through him, faces long gone, a mother's song in a language half forgotten, a father's voice, swallowed by whiskey and regret. Finally, he said, "Because once long ago, no one helped me." The woman's breath caught. She wanted to ask more, but his tone told her the past was a place he would not walk tonight. Silence fell heavy again, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the soft whistle of night birds. The prairie stretched infinite around them, a vast shadow filled with both promise and peril. The warrior remained awake long after the woman and her brother drifted into uneasy sleep. His bow lay across his knees, his eyes sharp in the starlight. He listened to the wind, to the faint echoes of hooves far in the dark, to the pulse of the land itself. The boy's grip had loosened in slumber, but the memory of it still burned against his wrist. For the first time in years, the warrior felt tethered not by rope or chain, but by something far heavier. Responsibility. He exhaled slowly, almost bitterly. At dawn, there would be no turning back. And somewhere beyond the horizon, 5 hunters sharpened their knives, unaware that the hunted had just found their shield. The stars had only just begun to pale when the warrior roused them. He gave no long speeches, no gentle words. A hand on the girl's shoulder, a quiet nudge to the boy, and they were up. The prairie air was cold at that hour, the kind of cold that bit at the lungs and made every breath sting. The warrior tightened a leather strap across his chest, adjusted the quiver of arrows at his back, and listened, always listening. The land had a language, and he had spent his life learning it. This morning its whispers told him danger was not far behind. The stallion stood ready, its breath steaming in the chill, muscles trembling with restrained energy. The boy climbed first, sleep still clinging to his eyes, but his small body clinging firmly to the saddle. The girl followed, her hand grasping the warrior's as he pulled her up behind. She settled against the boy, one arm around him, the other, holding on to the warrior's waist. Without a word, the warrior urged the horse forward. Hooves pounded the earth, and soon the cottonwoods were behind them, swallowed by the growing dawn. The land unfurled before them endless stretches of prairie, broken by rocky rises and jagged canyons. The rising sun painted the sky in fire, but it also revealed their trail. Dust rose in faint clouds where they passed. The warrior knew the outlaws would read it like scripture. The girl looked back once and saw it, the faint line of dust far. Across the horizon, they were still being followed. Her chest tightened. She pressed her cheek against her brother's hair, whispering words she hoped sounded like comfort. Though they were more prayer than promise, the warrior spoke at last, his voice low but firm. "We take the canyon. The walls will hide our trail." She nodded, though fear coiled in her gut. A canyon meant narrow paths, no room to flee if ambushed. But what choice did they have? By midday, the sun blazed overhead, beating down on their backs. Heat shimmered on the horizon. The stallion's breath came heavy, but he did not slow. The warrior guided them toward a jagged scar in the land ahead, a canyon cut deep into red stone. From afar, it looked like a wound splitting the earth opened out. The horse picked its way down the narrow slope, hooves clattering against rock. The air grew cooler in the shadows, the smell of stone and sagebrush heavy around them. She held her breath, heart hammering. Her brother's small body pressed against hers, his trust a weight she both cherished and feared. The canyon walls rose higher, closing in. Shadows wrapped around them, and the sky became only a thin ribbon of blue above. The girl shivered despite the heat. The warrior slowed the horse to a walk, his sharp eyes flicking to every bend, every ledge. His bow hung ready across his lap. His silence was a shield, but also a warning. The boy broke the hush, his voice a whisper. "Will they find us here?" The warrior's reply was simple. "If they do, the walls will remember their blood." The girl shivered at the words. It was not bravado. He spoke with the certainty of a man who had seen enough battles to know. Survival came only to those willing to spill blood when the time came. They rode deeper until the canyon widened slightly, revealing a dry riverbed strewn with pale stones. The warrior dismounted, scanning the ground. He crouched, fingers brushing the earth, reading it like a book. He stood after a long pause, his jaw tight. "They are close." The girl's stomach twisted. "How do you know?" He pointed to a faint scuff mark on a stone, so slight she wouldn't have noticed it. "Scouts. They ride ahead of the pack." "We are not alone." Before she could answer, the echo of laughter rang faintly through the canyon. Men's voices carried on the wind. The boy stiffened, clinging tighter. The warrior's hand went to his bow, eyes narrowing. He moved like the canyon itself had. Breathed life into him, calm, deliberate, but dangerous. He turned to the girl. "Stay with the horse. Protect your brother." "What about you?" she asked, her voice breaking. The warrior strung his bow, his long black hair swaying with the motion. The beads and feathers of his necklace caught the light. His muscles flexed as he drew the string back slowly, testing its strength. "I will show them this canyon is not theirs to take." The girl opened her mouth to protest, but the words died when she saw his face. There was no fear in him, only a terrible resolve. Her brother whispered, voice small, "Will he come back?" She wrapped her arms around him, staring at the warrior's broad back as he moved toward the canyon's mouth. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to promise the boy safety. But the truth weighed heavy on her tongue, so she said nothing. The canyon grew still, holding its breath, as the warrior stepped forward into the narrowing passage where sunlight and shadow clashed. And somewhere ahead, the hunters waited. The sun climbed higher, turning the prairie grass into waves of gold. But to Sarah, it felt like the light was a spotlight, exposing their fear for all to see. She clutched her brother tighter as he leaned against her, his small face pale and tired. Every muscle in her body ached, but she dared not show it. The warrior stood just ahead, bow still in hand, scanning the horizon with a stillness that was both reassuring and frightening. His presence seemed carved from the earth itself, unmoving, unyielding. Shirtless beneath the growing heat, his powerful frame glistened faintly, every scar on his chest telling a story she dared not ask about. The feathers and beads in his necklace swayed in the light breeze, whispering softly against his skin. For Sarah, he was an enigma, neither captor nor savior, but something between, something far larger than she could name. A hawk screamed overhead. The warrior's head tilted sharply, eyes narrowing toward the south. He crouched suddenly, pressing his palm against the soil, then closed his eyes. Sarah and her brother exchanged a worried glance, their breath catching in their throats. When he rose, his voice came low, quiet, yet carrying a weight that settled heavily on them. Riders? Not far. Her heart jolted. The boy whimpered, clutching Sarah's arm. She hushed him quickly, but her own voice trembled. What do we do? The warrior turned, his gaze meeting hers. His dark eyes were not cruel, but they were piercing, as though stripping away her fear to see what strength lay beneath. We move, quiet, fast. And then, without hesitation, he bent low, extending a strong hand to her brother. The boy froze for a moment, unsure, but Sarah gave the smallest nod. Slowly the boy placed his tiny hand into the warrior's. The warrior lifted him effortlessly, settling the child against his broad shoulder as if he weighed nothing more than a sack of grain. Yet there was no roughness in his grip, only care. Sarah's chest tightened. This man, this warrior who owed them nothing, was bearing their burden as though it were his own. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, to beg forgiveness for every cruel word she had ever heard spoken against his people. But her throat closed tight. They moved through the cottonwoods, the warrior leading, stepped soundless on the dry earth. Sarah stumbled now and then, skirts snagging on thorns, but each time she faltered, the warrior's hand shot back, steadying her without a word. His strength was a lifeline, and she clung to it, even as fear pressed harder with every passing second. After nearly an hour, the trees gave way to a hidden canyon. Jagged red cliffs rose high around them, the stone glowing warm under the sun. A narrow stream trickled at the bottom, glistening like silver. The air felt cooler here, hushed, like a secret sanctuary carved out of the wilderness. The warrior set the boy gently down beside the stream. "Drink," he said simply. The child obeyed, kneeling and cupping the water in small, trembling hands. Sarah dropped beside him, scooping water to her lips, the coolness searing her dry throat. For the first time in days, she felt life returning to her veins. She looked up at the warrior, who remained standing at the mouth of the canyon, his silhouette framed against the glaring sky. Bow in hand and quiver slung across his back, he looked like a sentinel, like a man born for battle, for protection. The boy leaned against Sarah after drinking his fill. His eyes drooped, heavy with exhaustion. She brushed his hair back from his forehead, whispering softly, "Rest now." Just a little, but Sarah's own mind was racing. The canyon was shelter, yes, but also a trap if the riders found them. Her breath caught in her chest at the thought. She turned to the warrior, voice hushed. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know who we are." For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he turned his head, eyes shadowed but fierce. "I know what it means to be hunted." The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. Sarah felt them strike deep, filling the silence with unspoken pain. She wanted to ask more who had hunted him, what scars lay beneath his stoic face, but something told her not to. Instead, she lowered her gaze, pressing her hand against her brother's shoulder. The warrior's eyes softened slightly. "You are safe here, for now. But as his gaze drifted back to the open prairie beyond the canyon walls, Sarah followed his line of sight. Far in the distance, a dust cloud was rising thin but unmistakable. The riders were closing in, and the safety he promised might vanish with the wind. The canyon silence was broken only by the trickle of water and the soft rustle of leaves. Every sound carried weight here. Even the boy's shallow breath seemed loud against the towering stone walls. Elena pressed her brother close, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, while the warriors stood at the canyon's mouth unmoving, unyielding. Like a carved figure of stone, the rising dust cloud grew nearer. The faint thunder of hooves rolled across the prairie, echoing off the canyon walls. Elena swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Are they coming for us?" she whispered. The warrior did not answer. His dark eyes narrowed, his long black hair catching in the wind, tribal beads and feathers swaying lightly. His silence was not empty, it was focus, a readiness that steadied the air around him. He slowly lifted his bow, checking the tension in the string, then glanced back toward Elena. "They will not cross easily," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of certainty. The boy stirred, fear flashing across his face. "Will they find us here?" The warrior knelt, laying a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "They will try, but this land favors those who respect it, and it does not favor them." Elena's eyes burned with questions she dared not ask. She only tightened her grip on her brother and looked at the warrior as though his strength was the only shield they had left. The riders appeared at last, dark figures on horseback, weaving through the prairie grass like a black tide. Dust billowed behind them, turning the horizon into a storm of earth and fury. Elena recognized the sheriff's hat among them, its brim shadowing a face twisted in rage. "God help us," she murmured. The warrior rose to his full height, shirtless. His body gleamed with sweat, every muscle carved by years of battle and endurance. His bow rested easily in his hand, yet there was no doubt he could strike before an enemy blinked. The riders halted just beyond the canyon's opening, wary of its narrow pass. Their leader, Sheriff McGraw, raised a hand. His voice rang out, rough as gravel. "Send the woman and boy out. We got no quarrel with you, Redskin. But if you stand in our way, you'll meet the same rope we planned for them." The words slithered into the canyon like snakes. Elena felt them coil around her chest, suffocating. She looked at the warrior, desperate for reassurance, but his gaze was unflinching, his jaw set like iron. He took a single step forward, his bare feet crunching softly on gravel. Then another, until he stood at the threshold of the canyon, his body a barrier between the riders and the fugitives he protected. "You will not have them," he said simply. A murmur rippled through the men on horseback. Some shifted uneasily, fingering their rifles. McGraw's face darkened. "You'd risk your life for 2 strays?" He spat. "That woman ain't worth it, and the boy, he won't live long enough to thank you. Step aside." The warriors' eyes burned like flint. "A child's life is always worth it. A woman's dignity is worth it. You have already lost your honor, you will not take theirs." For a long, tense moment, the canyon held its breath. The men fidgeted in their saddles. Dust swirled between them like restless spirits. Elena clutched her brother tighter, trembling with the knowledge that blood could spill at any second. She prayed to God, to fate, to the land itself, that the warrior's strength would be enough. McGraw raised his rifle. "So be it." The warrior moved like lightning. In one fluid motion, his bow bent and sang the arrow slicing through the air with deadly speed. McGraw's rifle was struck from his hands before he could fire, the wood splintering in two. Canyon erupted. Shouts, curses, the clatter of hooves as men scrambled to react. Some raised their weapons, others hesitated, caught between fear and pride. But the warrior did not falter. Another arrow flew, striking the ground at her rider's feet, sending the horse rearing. Dust and chaos clouded the air. Still, the sheriff's men pressed forward, edging toward the canyon. They wanted blood. The warrior turned, his voice steady but urgent. "Take your brother deeper into the canyon. Do not stop until you find the cave. Go." Elena's breath caught. She didn't want to leave him, this fierce protector who had stood like a wall against hatred itself. But the fire in his eyes told her she had no choice. She grabbed her brother's hand and fled into the canyon's winding passage, her heart tearing with every step. Behind her, the warrior's defiant cry echoed against the stone, a sound both human and eternal. The battle for their lives had begun. The gunfire had stopped. The echoes of it still clung to the canyon walls like ghosts refusing to leave, but the sound itself had fallen away into silence. Smoke drifted in thin curls above the canyon floor, mixing with the dust that had been stirred by galloping hooves. Broken rifles lay scattered where the riders had dropped them, and the canyon was now filled only with the sound of shallow, breathing three people huddled together in the aftermath of violence. Elena clutched her younger brother, Thomas, against her chest, her dress torn, her face streaked with both dust and tears. The boy trembled, his small hand gripping her arm like it was the last piece of solid ground in a collapsing world. And then her eyes turned slowly to the man who had given them this chance to keep breathing. The warrior stood tall despite the veil, blood running down his side, crimson staining his bronzed skin. His long black hair, matted with sweat and streaked with dust, still hung proud across his shoulders. The bow he had carried all through the night was gone splintered in the fight, but in his hand he now held the blade of his ancestors, they steel glinting faintly in the dying light. He looked like something carved from the canyon walls themselves, unyielding, immovable, timeless. "Elena," Thomas whispered, his voice thin with fear. Is he still standing?" She swallowed, her throat raw, and nodded slowly. "Yes, brother. He's still standing." The warrior staggered once, his knees threatening to give way, but he forced his body upright, his chest heaving with each breath. His dark eyes swept over the fallen man and then lifted to the horizon beyond the canyon. The riders were gone there, anger scattered by his unbreakable will. Yet Elena knew their reprieve was not permanent. Men like those always came back, and with greater numbers. She rose to her feet, leaving Thomas sitting against the canyon wall. Her steps were hesitant at first, then stronger, until she was standing only a few feet from him. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice trembling not just with relief but with awe. "You saved us when no one else would." The warrior did not answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the boy, then on her, before he finally spoke, his voice deep, steady, carrying both strength and sorrow. "I gave what I could. But saving you today does not mean the danger is gone." Elena's eyes welled with fresh tears. "Then take us with you, please. I asked you once, back in town, and I ask you again. Don't leave us here to face them alone." For the first time, his stern expression softened. He looked down, as though searching the earth for an answer, then back at her. In his silence there was a gravity that spoke louder than words. A man who had walked through fire too many times, a man whose past carried scars that no one could see. But there was also something else, something fragile yet unbroken. Finally, he gave a single nod. "Then you will walk with me, both of you. But know this, my path is not easy. It is filled with hardship. If you follow, you must carry that weight." 2. Elena's hand reached for his, small and trembling. She didn't hesitate. "We already live with hardship, but with you, we live." Thomas slowly stood, his boyish face streaked with dirt but his eyes filled with quiet determination. He limped forward, clutching his sister's other hand, and then looked up at the warrior with something like reverence. "I'll walk too. I'll be strong." The warrior's jaw tightened, and for the briefest moment his eyes glistened with something human, vulnerable. He turned away, lifting his gaze to the horizon where the prairie stretched out in an endless sea of fading gold beneath the setting sun. "Then we walked together," he said simply, and so they did. Step by step, the three of them left the blood-stained canyon behind. The prairie winds rushed to meet them, carrying with it both uncertainty and the promise of tomorrow. The warrior walked first, his frame a shield against whatever might come. Elena followed close, her brother at her side, her heart pounding not just with fear, but with the strange new hope that somehow, against all odds, they might carve out a future in this unforgiving land. Behind them, the canyon grew still once more, its silence heavy, its stones keeping the secrets of the battle fought there. Ahead, the vast unknown waited, and with it, a story yet unwritten, for the first time. In years, Elena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found not just a protector, but a family.